Let's talk about something we've all felt at some point: the endless giving, the constant reaching out, the showing up even when your presence is being taken for granted. You keep giving more of yourself, hoping that maybe this time they'll finally see you. But what happens? The more you give, the more invisible you start to feel. Sound familiar? Now listen closely. There's a powerful shift that happens the moment you stop showing up. When you pull your energy back, not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of clarity and self-respect, the entire dynamic begins to change. Suddenly, the silence becomes louder than any words you've spoken. Your absence starts to echo where your presence was once ignored, and the very person who couldn't find the time to value you, they start wondering where you went. They start looking for you, because here's the truth: people don't realize the weight of your presence until it's gone. Your energy has been their comfort zone, your consistency has been their safety net. But when that rhythm is broken, when you stop showing up, that's when the mind starts racing, that's when the heart starts noticing. Not because you've disappeared, but because your presence is no longer taken for granted, and more importantly, when you stop showing up for them, you finally start showing up for you, you reclaim your energy. You reconnect with your peace. You remember what it feels like to pour into your own cup instead of constantly filling someone else's. That's where your power returns, not in the noise, but in the withdrawal. Not in begging to be seen, but in confidently choosing to be unavailable for anything less than respect. When you are always available, always there, always showing up, your presence becomes expected. It turns into background noise in someone else's life. That daily check-in, that quick reply, that effort you keep making, it slowly starts losing its impact because it's too consistent, too predictable. People start assuming it's just who you are, not something you choose, and that's the danger. When something valuable becomes predictable, the mind begins to underestimate its worth. The very thing that once made someone feel secure starts blending into the everyday routine. And before long, it's no longer seen as effort. It's seen as obligation. That's the moment when your presence, instead of being appreciated, gets quietly dismissed. But the second you pull back, intentionally, not emotionally, the energy shifts. You stop showing up not as an act of punishment, but as an act of self-awareness. You recognize that your value doesn't lie in your availability, it lies in your essence. And when you remove that essence from the equation, the other person begins to feel the gap. The rhythm they were used to, broken. The comfort of knowing you're always a call away, gone. Now, your absence becomes louder than all the times you tried to speak your truth and weren't heard. That silence, the kind that follows your withdrawal, becomes the message they can't ignore. There's a psychological principle at play here. Human beings respond more intensely to loss than they do to gain. It's called loss aversion. When you're constantly present, people feel no risk of losing you. But when your consistent presence is disrupted, their mind goes into alert. They begin wondering, what changed? Why did the calls stop? Why don't I feel that energy anymore? And just like that, the person who once overlooked you begins scanning their world for your presence. Because we only begin to truly value things once they're no longer easily accessible. What used to be taken for granted is now missed. What was expected now becomes desired. It's in your pulling back that you reclaim power, not power over someone else, but power over your own emotional investment. You stop giving energy to what isn't nourishing you. You let go of the need to constantly remind someone of your worth because you know your worth speaks loudest in your absence. This isn't about being distant for the sake of strategy. It's about honoring your own boundaries. You've shown up long enough. You've given enough. Now, it's time to shift the energy inward and let the world adjust to the version of you that no longer shows up out of habit, but out of choice. The truth is, nothing makes someone reflect more than the space created when you stop filling every silence with your presence. In that quiet void, they're left to sit with what they've lost, and that's when real clarity begins. When you step away from a connection where your presence was once constant, a shift takes place. Not just in the dynamic between you and the other person, but deep within their own mind. You see, humans are wired to respond to mystery. When everything about you is accessible, open, and predictable, there's no room for their imagination to wander. But the moment you stop showing up, when your texts don't come in, when your energy is no longer reaching out to them, the brain enters a state of curiosity. And curiosity is powerful. It's the seed of desire, of attention, of longing. They start to wonder, why the silence? What happened? Did something change? Did they move on? That wondering pulls them deeper into a mental loop they can't easily escape. And that's exactly when they begin to notice all the small things they once ignored: your voice, your presence, the way you supported them without asking for anything in return, the emotional space you created just by being there. All of those things that were invisible when you were consistently showing up now begin to flash in their memory like signs they never read when they had the chance. It's not that you've become different. It's that your absence creates room for realization. This isn't manipulation, it's neuroscience. The brain dislikes unanswered questions. When a pattern is broken, the mind starts searching for meaning, and when it comes to human relationships, that search is emotional. They begin to recall moments, review memories, replay conversations, trying to make sense of your disappearance. This process doesn't just make them curious, it activates emotional connection. In wondering where you've gone, they also revisit how it felt when you were there. And that's when something important happens. They begin to feel the difference, not just think about it. Feel it, and emotion is the bridge between thought and action. In your silence, they're not just missing words. They're missing the emotional impact you had on them. The way your presence added light to their day, the security your consistency gave them. They may not have noticed it in the moment, but now, in the absence, it becomes crystal clear. That's how the pullback works. Not through force, not through games, but through nature. It invites reflection, it stirs curiosity. It makes them want to reach out, not because you asked, but because they genuinely feel your absence. And when that feeling hits deep enough, action often follows. They call, they text, they start to show up, because curiosity has done its job. It's opened the door for them to see your value not just mentally, but emotionally. When you stop showing up, one of the most profound shifts happens, not in them, but in you. You begin to see clearly how much energy you were giving and how little you were receiving in return. You realize how often you were reaching out just to feel connected, how many times you silenced your needs so the other person wouldn't feel uncomfortable, how frequently you made space for them even when they wouldn't do the same for you. And in this new quiet, the space you've created by not chasing, you start to come home to yourself. This is where your true power lies, because now, instead of waiting for someone to value you, you begin to value yourself. You no longer look for validation in their responses or silence or return. Instead, you rediscover your worth without anyone needing to confirm it. The energy you used to invest in someone else's comfort, someone else's availability, someone else's approval, you reclaim it. And that reclaimed energy is transformational. It starts showing up in your confidence, your boundaries, your peace. You begin to stand taller, speak clearer, and most importantly, you stop apologizing for your standards. This internal shift doesn't go unnoticed. The person who once took your availability for granted will start to feel something different in the air. That same energy they always assumed would be there for them is no longer reaching out. That emotional space they used to occupy now feels unfamiliar, colder, quieter. It's not filled with bitterness, it's filled with absence, and that's what's powerful. You're not trying to prove a point. You've simply removed yourself from a place where your energy wasn't appreciated, and in that removal, you change the dynamic. Not only does this create curiosity and emotional reflection on their end, it establishes new terms. Terms that say, I'm not here to earn love, I'm here to receive it with mutual effort. And that energy is magnetic. It's what makes people start to wonder not just where you went, but who you've become. They begin to recognize that you're no longer willing to shrink for someone to notice you. You've expanded in your silence, grown in your stillness, and they can feel that shift. Even if they don't say it, they feel it. That emotional weight, that's your power returning. So when you stop showing up, yes, it creates space for someone else to notice your absence, but more importantly, it creates space for you to notice yourself again. To reset your emotional center, to evaluate who is worthy of your attention and who is simply benefiting from your availability. That's not just strength, that's emotional evolution. And once you've tasted that kind of peace, that kind of clarity, you won't chase again. Because you've finally remembered, real love doesn't require you to abandon yourself to be seen. When you stop showing up, you also begin to break the cycle of emotional dependency, something that often keeps you locked in patterns where your self-worth is measured by someone else's responses. This is one of the most important and liberating parts of pulling back. Because let's be honest, when you're always the one reaching out, always the one initiating, always the one holding the connection together, it's easy to start believing that your value lies in how much effort you give. And that's a dangerous place to live, because it trains your nervous system to expect validation through pursuit. But when you consciously step back, you reclaim control. You stop allowing the emotional roller coaster of will they respond, will they care, will they miss me, to dictate your peace. You pull your energy inward, back into your own core, that energy that once went into decoding mixed signals, overthinking late-night texts, and checking who watched your story. It now becomes available for your healing, your growth, your power. You begin to see clearly. You start recognizing that real connection is never one-sided, that showing up for someone who doesn't reciprocate is not loyalty, it's self-abandonment. This clarity creates emotional freedom. You no longer feel the need to chase a reaction. You begin to understand that silence doesn't always mean rejection. It can mean redirection, redirection back to yourself, to your boundaries, to your standards. To the truth that the right people don't need to be chased. They recognize your value and they meet you with equal effort. The moment you internalize this truth, you become emotionally untouchable in the best way. Not cold, not bitter, but empowered. What this does energetically is shift the playing field. The person who once assumed you'd always be there now senses the energetic gap, the silence, the non-reaction. And in that stillness, they begin to feel the emotional weight of what you used to give, the daily check-ins, the emotional availability, the warmth, the thoughtfulness. When that stops, it hits differently. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a slow, haunting realization. You were the glue, and now the bond is slipping. That awareness forces them to reflect on their own behavior, their lack of effort, their missed chances. And here's where the magic happens. If they truly cared, this reflection can spark growth. Sometimes your absence is the mirror someone needs to see themselves clearly. But even if they don't return, even if nothing changes on their end, you have changed. You've broken the emotional habit of seeking fulfillment outside yourself. You've stopped showing up for someone else and started showing up for you. And that shift, that's where your power really begins. When you stop showing up, you also trigger something unexpected. You remove their emotional safety net. They no longer have the comfort of knowing that you'll always be available, always be forgiving, always be waiting in the background to make things easy. That comfort they once took for granted begins to feel like a void. Your absence becomes a mirror, one that reflects everything they were overlooking, dismissing, or undervaluing about you. Suddenly, the silence becomes louder than all the conversations you used to initiate. The space you leave behind begins to echo with everything they failed to appreciate when you were there. This emotional absence does something powerful. It forces them to become aware. It disrupts the autopilot they were living on. They start asking questions internally. Why did she stop reaching out? Is she done? Did she move on? And for the first time, they begin to experience what you felt for so long, uncertainty. The very thing you were living with daily becomes their new reality. But the difference is you're not waiting anymore. You've stepped out of that cycle. You're no longer tied to how they respond. You've reclaimed your time, your emotions, your peace. And that's the most powerful position to operate from. This shift also impacts how you show up for future relationships. You begin to carry a new frequency, one that says, I know my worth and I will never beg to be seen again. People feel this energy when they interact with you. You become more intentional, more calm, more centered. You don't rush into proving yourself. You don't over-explain. You don't chase. Instead, you observe, you receive. You allow people to meet you where you are or not at all. That is emotional maturity, that is self-respect in action, and here's the key. This isn't about revenge. It's not about making someone miss you just to satisfy your ego. It's about breaking a pattern. It's about stopping the emotional bleeding that happens when you constantly give more than you receive. It's about no longer placing your value in someone else's recognition. You've learned to give yourself the love and presence you once begged from others. That's not just healing, that's transformation, and that's when the real craving begins from them, because when someone senses that you've moved from desperation to peace, from clinging to clarity, from chasing to choosing, they feel it deeply. So let them feel your absence, not as punishment, but as a powerful reminder of what consistent presence really feels like. Let your silence teach them what your words and your efforts never could. You're not lost, you're found. You're not withdrawn, you're aligned, and when you show up for yourself that fiercely, others are left with one undeniable truth. The moment you stopped showing up for them is the moment they truly began to realize what they lost. When you stop showing up, you're not just removing yourself physically, you're shifting the emotional dynamics of the entire connection. You are signaling that your energy is no longer up for grabs, that your time, love, attention, and presence must be earned, not expected. This isn't about playing games, this is about redefining your standards, and in doing so, something profound happens. People begin to approach you differently, they feel the gap, they notice the change in your behavior. They may not always understand it right away, but they feel it. And they start to reflect, question, and yes, crave your presence again. You see, the human mind becomes fixated on what it can no longer access easily. That's just psychology. When something is always available, it's easy to take it for granted. But the moment it's gone, truly gone, the mind begins to obsess over it. What happened? Why did she stop trying? Is she seeing someone else? These questions don't come from a place of clarity. They come from uncertainty, and uncertainty breeds interest. This is where attraction builds. It's not because you're manipulating anything. It's because you've stopped feeding a dynamic that was one-sided and unfulfilling. What you've done is flip the script. You've gone from being the one who constantly proves your worth to the one who simply embodies it. You no longer chase, you attract. You no longer convince, you allow. And this shift speaks louder than any text, any call, or any desperate attempt to be noticed. Your silence becomes a statement. Your absence becomes a lesson. Your detachment becomes the boundary that tells the world, I no longer show up for places that drain me. I show up for myself. Now, this doesn't mean you shut down or turn cold. Quite the opposite. You begin to radiate a different energy, a calm, grounded, self-contained power, the kind that doesn't seek approval but commands respect. The kind that doesn't panic when someone pulls away, but instead trusts that what's meant for you will never require you to chase it, and people feel that, they sense the difference, they become drawn not just to your presence, but to your peace. Because peace is magnetic, it's rare, and when someone realizes that you are no longer emotionally available on demand, they will either rise to meet your energy or fall away. Either way, you win. So if you're wondering what happens when you stop showing up, this is it. You realign your energy, you reclaim your time, and in the process, you not only give the other person space to feel your absence, you also give yourself the space to remember your own power, and from that place, you stop chasing love and start becoming it. When you stop showing up, something incredible happens, not just in them, but in you. The energy you used to pour into proving your worth, into fixing the connection, into showing up even when it hurt, you redirect that energy inward. And in that space, you begin to see your reflection more clearly. You remember the strength you forgot you had. You remember the laughter, the light, the boundaries you once honored before you bent them for someone else. That inner shift is the beginning of everything. It's not about absence as a strategy. It's about presence as a healing, your own presence to yourself. As you stop overextending, you create room for the other person to feel the gravity of your absence. For the first time, they are no longer cushioned by your constant efforts, texts, calls, or emotional labor. The silence you leave behind speaks louder than all the explanations you once gave. And in that silence, they come face to face with what they've lost, the emotional security, the support, the devotion. They start to reflect, to rewind the moments, to revisit the times when your presence was a constant comfort. You don't have to chase this realization. Your withdrawal becomes your most powerful message, but more importantly, this isn't about making them suffer. This is about you breaking a cycle of one-sided effort, emotional burnout, and undervalued commitment. You've chosen to reclaim your energy, not because you want revenge, but because you want peace. You've come to understand that your worth doesn't need to be proven. It needs to be protected. The shift you've made is not coldness, it's clarity. And in that clarity, you stop fighting to be seen and start allowing those who truly value you to step forward. People often come back when they feel your absence, but here's the deeper truth. You won't be the same when they do. You'll have grown, you'll have evolved, you'll no longer accept the crumbs you once called a feast. The love you offer now comes from overflow, not desperation. You've become a different version of yourself, one that doesn't chase, beg, or explain. You radiate presence without performance, and only those aligned with your truth will be able to meet you there. So, let your absence be felt. Let your silence say what your voice no longer needs to. Let the energy you once poured into proving your place now be redirected toward becoming your most powerful, authentic self. When you stop showing up for people who take you for granted, you start showing up for the person who matters most to you. And that shift, that moment of transformation, is what changes everything, not just for them, but for you. If something resonated with your heart, it's because a part of you is ready to rise. A part of you already knows that you were never meant to beg for love, prove your worth, or shrink just to be accepted. You were meant to stand tall in your power, to honor your energy, and to be met with the same depth that you give so freely. And that begins not with someone else, but with you. I appreciate you for showing up for yourself by simply being here and listening. That's not a small thing, it's a bold act of self-love. And every time you choose you, every time you pull your energy back from what drains you and pour it into what heals you, you create a new standard, not just for how others treat you, but for how you treat you. That's where real transformation lives. So as you step forward from here, carry this with you. Your silence has power, your absence has weight, your energy is valuable, and when you stop giving it to what doesn't grow you, you finally make space for what does. Thank you once again. Take care of your heart, protect your peace, and remember, you are never chasing love, you are love. Until next time, stay grounded, stay true, and goodbye for now.